This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is a show for January 22nd, 2019, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, Cuboids?
Cristina Roach.
Hey everyone.
And producer Pat.
Hi, checkers.
We have a great show for you on this cold winter's eve. Cristina is going to explore Puffery. And then Pat is going to do some fact-checking on Bohemian Rhapsody and Brian May. But first, I'm going to discuss some Lincoln Memorial absurdity. I got a joke for you. Tell me if you heard this one. Some black Jews, white Christians, and Native Americans walk into Lincoln Memorial. The Jews taunt the Christians. An older Native man approaches the white Christians and bangs a drum in the face of a teenager for a few minutes. The white kid just smiles at him, and then a fraction of the internet loses its mind, and then the white kid gets death threats. Hilarious, right?
Ha ha ha.
Or more succinctly, 3 religious groups met in a protest space, and no one was harmed at all. Of course, that isn't the whole story, and it was an attempt at levity regarding some absurdity that erupted last week. The incident happened at Lincoln Memorial was on Friday. Initial impressions happened over the weekend, and by Sunday, media outlets were revising their initial coverage. Now, we're taping this on Tuesday the 22nd, and I don't know what has happened between now and when you're going to hear this, but oh boy, what a saddening situation. I've witnessed many people unwilling to change their narrative despite the whole thing being caught on video. I wanted to share some quick facts about it, how we have to be ever so vigilant to protect ourselves against biases, and ending with a call for sanity, which I might just be preaching to the choir. So some quick facts. A group called the Hebrew Israelites, who believe some black Americans came from an ancient tribe in Israel, makes antagonistic and vulgar remarks to various people, including a group from Covington Catholic High School, who were in Washington that day for a Right to Life march early in the day. Some of these kids are wearing MAGA, or Make America Great Again hats. Now, the remarks from the Hebrew Israelites are pretty vulgar. Yeah. There's the N-word, incestuous comment. Like, it's pretty rough, and it's going on for quite some time. Yeah. Eventually, the high school boys start responding. They ask, supposedly, for permission from their chaperone to do some school cheers in response. Although no conflict seems imminent from the video, Omaha tribal elder Nathan Phillips, who was there for an Indigenous Peoples March, believes he should intervene, so he walks between the two groups while drumming. He keeps walking in the crowd of high school boys until he comes up to Nick Sandman, who stands there. They are both looking at each other. Nick has a MAGA hat on. He is smiling or smirking while Phillips drums in his face for a few minutes. While this is happening, most of the boys are making silly faces or noises. A couple do a tomahawk chop, popularized in sports games from when I was growing up and now horrible to see. Yeah. And some person or people may have shouted, "Build that wall." Eventually, the boys get on the bus to go home and the crowd disperses. What happened was that a short video went around the internet, seemingly showing that Sandman was blocking or confronting a native elder. People started to share photos and info about high school students. Like, basically, they found, 30 or 40 photos of these kids at the rally, posted it, and said, let's make sure these kids don't get into college. Doxing Sandman and his family began. Someone who looks like Sandman got death threats and was doxed. He got doxxed. His family was threatened. Yeah. Exactly. Death threats. Then a full video on Sunday shows more of the context. The narrative's changing. Sandman released a public response, obviously vetted through some sort of communication.
Much kinder than mine would have been, so there was some serious PR spin.
Yes, there was some PR spin. He thought another group of adults might have been trying to start a conflict with his group, so he thought it best just to stand there.
Yeah.
Now, what's going on here? In-group, out-group bias, confirmation bias, stereotyping, cognitive dissonance, group attribution error, social desirability, sunk cost. In other words, tribalism, jumping to conclusions, mob mentality, and a misplaced desire for justice. I hate sounding like right-wing talking points, but the left-wing outrage machine went bonkers. Oh, yeah. And this is a great example of fake news. CNN, who updated their news articles, said the full video shows a different perspective. Yes, a more accurate one, as it's on video. And they're not willing to say what we said before was wrong, and this new video shows something more accurate, just a different perspective. Yeah. And then people started to say, well, it just shows how complex and volatile the situation is in the United States, without saying the elder approached the kids. Yeah. Now, obviously, we don't have 100% audio and video of everything, but that's okay. That's how it goes in the nature of the world. We have enough information, I think, to at least describe certain facts.
We have a lot more video and information and eyes on a situation than we would have 20 years ago. Like,
True.
We're really able to get a pretty good lead on what's going on.
On the other hand, Adam, because there wasn't video, this would have been a non-issue.
True.
Like, literally people at a protest site yelling at each other. Well, okay.
That's every protest site.
Exactly.
Ever.
Exactly.
Right.
During the madness on the weekend, I checked Facebook's Snopes page, and they just repeated an Associated Press piece which was biased against Sandman. Shame on them. Now, I know. When you perceive injustice, you feel it is your moral duty to do something about it. The evildoers must be punished. But whenever you get that feeling of righteousness, I'm going to ask you, slow down, take a breath, don't post something right away or respond, but think. Do I have the full story? Is the information I'm getting in or out of context? Do I have a bias towards a group because they are part of my tribe, or a negative one because they are not? Do I believe in proportionality? Do I think only some groups are allowed the right to protest? Is someone wearing a hat the only thing you need to know about them? I realize it's a very interesting and unfortunate time in the States where just wearing a hat that supports the president is seen as an act of, antagonism? As a statement of your total beliefs, of not caring about children or immigration or certain other things. And I don't think it's that simple, especially if they're teenagers who can't even vote.
Oh, yeah. When Trump was elected, these kids were like 14 years old.
Or
like,
even younger.
Think of it that way.
Yeah, well, truly elected, correct.
Yes, voted for, right?
Is one or two data points sufficient to understand the totality of a person, especially someone you are condemning or hoping that their life is destroyed? Yeah. Now, to share personal experiences and feelings, I'm very riled up about this, and I'm trying to be more reasonable. I was just telling Adam before he got here that I've had ongoing debates about this over the weekend, and I've tried to call for some saying, like, shouldn't we agree that death threats against minors aren't good? They're not funny. And one guy's like, screw them, whatever. And he thought the whole thing was just fun and games. Yeah. And then I actually now don't like this guy at all. I have very antagonistic feelings towards him, and I don't know him at all, aside from him being riled up, thinking it's okay to have death threats against children. Yeah. Oh, boy. But you got to pause and not comment right away. Think about it. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is precisely at the moment when you feel the most right is when you have to try your hardest to ensure that you aren't making the wrong move. Critical thinking can give you super-powered cognitive abilities, but only if you practice all the time. And one little addendum, as I was writing this, CNN found an article that said Twitter suspended the account that helped originally popularize this. May have been a fake account, may have been from a Russian bot farm, something which would tweet hundreds of times or 130 times a day for a couple of years, and then finds something like this, tags it with some volatile language, and sends it out. And again, there are a lot of problems in the world. Is this one the most important one? It may seem symbolic to other things, but just fight the symbolic thing, the actual thing. If you're concerned about Trump doing XYZ, do that. Yes. Not an older man walks up to a younger kid. And honestly, if someone banged a drum in my face for a couple of minutes, smirking would be the best thing I would come up with. I would at least say, stop it, or move. It'd be very annoying, because I'm just standing there, and he's come up to me.
Darren, that's pretty much your face all the time, actually.
Oh!
Now, when they showed, they showed a comparison picture of this kid, and they had a picture of him, and I think it was like a school picture or something, and he's kind of got the same smirk. I think that's just his face. You know, like, was he really trying to be? Was I really trying to be a dismissive smirk or whatever? Like,
it's just his face.
He's just.
Shouldn't the left be more accepting of people's genetic appearances?
So I have a few layers of thoughts on this. So when I first saw this, it was a person I know in a group chat I'm part of that shared it, sort of a picture of it, along with here's the number for the admissions at the school he wants to apply to. You should call it. And my immediate reaction, without even knowing that it was all kind of nonsense, is just like, that's not cool. Like, that's not a good reaction. Like, even if this guy really was antagonizing or yelling at this guy or whatever, it doesn't mean now let's heap on this pile and destroy someone's life, right? Like, it's not against the law to be a jerk, even though, it turns out that wasn't even happening. So there's a lot of levels of this should never have happened and people should never have had this reaction. And part of it is because the facts were wrong, and part of it is just because morally this is just a kind of a shitty thing to do. And last year, or maybe a couple of years ago, I read John Ronson's book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, which is really good and kind of puts a little bit of perspective on what happens often on social media, where someone will do something that's perceived to be wrong, not illegal by any stretch, but then people kind of jump on it, and it's let's do our best to get this person fired, and people's lives really get ruined for often jokes or somewhat innocuous things, which is to me really upsetting.
Can people not make mistakes? If someone, say, theoretically, was capable of showing genuine remorse, either as an adult or a child, like, you know what, I really screwed up, can they be forgiven? Yeah. I mean, there's people who have killed other people who eventually seek forgiveness and sometimes are given it. And the things we're talking about are relatively minor. Someone's tweeted the wrong thing. They've said the wrong thing. Yeah. Is it really hate in their heart, or just like we're all people in development, in progress? I don't mean to say that there aren't, say, horrible people, and there's some people who never change. And if you're heavily indoctrinated, say, into the Westboro Baptist Church, I don't think you're going to change. And you have to approach those groups a bit differently. But the average person who may have just made a mistake,
And I get it, because the MAGA hats and it's the pro-life things. These are things I kind of hate. But, you know, it's a teenager, you know.
Two things. I said that to Pat earlier. What if he was wearing a Toronto Raptors hat? Would this have elevated to, I mean, it still would have been a thing, but I don't think it would have been blown to the extent that it was. And the other thing was merely about context. I watched a really great video. It was from the speechwriter for Obama. And it was like a long-form interview with him. And he said one of the tricky things about writing speeches for the president is context. You have to try so hard to word things in a way that you don't leave a line that's hanging, that it can just easily be taken out of context. Mm-hmm. And I think more and more things just get so easily taken out of context because that's the world we live in. Everyone wants to get up on the news, report it first, and yeah, it's unfortunate.
Especially if you're a president where, you know, you publicly state so much every single day. So in the aggregate, the chances that certain little clips get taken out of context can really destroy a person, you know?
Right.
So my view is that there's people that don't like this kid's hat, and they don't like his behavior, and they don't necessarily like his beliefs. He's at a pro-life rally, right? It's okay to not like that, but it's also, you can have the belief that I condemn people saying that he needs to be punched in the face and that he needs to be doxxed. And no one is saying that the kid is an angel, but like the response is not appropriate in terms of what actually happened. So I think this is a bit of a nothing burger. No one was hurt. There was no violence. For some reason, it just caught fire, and I think it probably needs to die.
Agreed. And this would be, again, a great example, if it was, I don't know for sure, some sort of Russian troll farm, and you have people whipped up into a frenzy over things like this when they could be focused on other things.
I heard it may have originated in Brazil, but I haven't read further than that.
Regardless of where it originated, it was spread by, like, people on Twitter with blue check marks, like, you know, some people... celebrities, people with influence.
Because once celebrities pile on, once it's shared, and over, between Friday and maybe Sunday morning, 95% of all media was criticizing this kid. All the headlines were. I couldn't even find a different source. And now we turn to Cristina to talk to us about Puffery.
Our son is taking marketing and business admin, so we've had some interesting convos about marketing and truth in advertising lately. And a recent video on Cheddar's YouTube channel on the topic of puffery caught my attention and was a topic of a recent discussion. Now, like many of you, I've heard the term before, but was admittedly unaware of its legal implications in the marketing world until I watched that video. Since we're used to being constantly bombarded with ads that fall under this umbrella without even realizing it, I thought it would be great to cover on TRC. Puffery refers to exaggerated or false praise. As Wikipedia cites, in law, puffery is a promotional statement or claim that expresses subjective rather than objective views, which no reasonable person would take literally. Puffery serves to puff up an exaggerated image of what is being described and is especially featured in testimonials. A really succinct way to put it comes from Erica Waters' article, Difference Between False Advertising and Puffery. Quote, The difference between puffery and false advertising is the difference between legal promotion and illegal marketing claims. Puffery is a legal way of promoting a product or service through hyperbole or oversized statements that cannot be objectively verified. In Canada, we have a smaller scope or a more discerning view of whether an advertising claim falls under puffery than the US does. International law firm Gowling WLG has a guide to doing business in Canada about advertising and marketing on their website. So here's an excerpt. If the claim can be seen as relating to the performance, efficacy, or length of life of the product, it cannot be made without substantive evidence of an adequate and proper test to support it. Woohoo!
Unless you start with like traditionally used for, then you can say whatever the hell you want.
Right. As well, if the claim can be interpreted as likely to influence the consumer's purchase decision in terms of the general impression it creates, it cannot be dismissed as simple puffery. However, if a claim is so exaggerated or fanciful that no reasonable consumer would ever take it seriously, or if it is clearly expressed solely as a matter of opinion, not subject to objective assessment, even Canadians and our courts may be prepared to dismiss it as mere puff. Bottom line, the legal definition of puffery will depend on your geographic location, but you guys get the gist. Mm-hmm. So this term actually dates back to 1892 and the English Court of Appeal, which is second to the Supreme Court of the UK, so pretty high court. In the case of Carlisle versus Carbolic Smoke Ball Company, the defense argued that money should be paid to their client because an influenza preventive device failed to work. The manufacturer did promise in ads to compensate the consumer £100, which at the time was a lot of money, if the device failed to deliver on its claim. But when taken to task, they argued that the statement was, quote, mere puff. In other words, no one could possibly have taken the claim seriously.
So it's like saying, we'll give you $1 million if this doesn't work?
Yeah, I'll eat my shoe, you know. I'll get to that in a little bit, some of the claims that we see every day.
I'll give you the shirt off my back.
Right. Now, even though the defense lost, the decision, quote, endorsed the notion that traditional rules relating to promises might not apply to advertisements that were clearly not meant to be taken seriously. And poof, puffery was born. In 1984, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission stated that puffery does not warrant enforcement action by the FTC. It's a pretty big statement. Mm-hmm. So examples, statements like the world's best burgers or Dunkin' Donuts slogan, best coffee in America. Speaking of which, have you guys seen the scene in Elf where Will Ferrell walks into this hole-in-wall coffee shop and it has a sign that says the world's best coffee, and he walks in and he's like, congratulations.
Yes, it's a very good movie.
It's one of my favorite scenes, which is used in the film, obviously, to highlight his naivete, but the Cheddar video highlights that scene in their video because it's a classic example of puffery that we just walk by every day.
Yeah.
The American Bar Association published an extensive article a couple of years ago in Antitrust magazine, which is devoted exclusively to antitrust and consumer protection law. It's written by lawyers at Venable LLC, and it's called The Best Explanation and Update on Puffery You Will Ever Read, which is pretty cute considering the topic, but it is indeed a robust overview from the experts. So here we go. We'll dive right into the famous modern-day example, and this was the one used in Cheddar's video also. In the 90s, the pizza delivery business was booming and many companies were vying for a piece of that pie. In order to try to get in on the market share that Pizza Hut was dominating, Papa John's, which we didn't have Papa John's here back in the day, we do now. They launched a $300 million national marketing campaign with the slogan, better ingredients, better pizza. Now, Pizza Hut had a big problem with this, as you can imagine, and sued them in '97, claiming that not only did the slogan itself constitute false advertising, but it also, quote, challenged the entire marketing campaign for its disparaging representations of the competition's food quality.
Wow.
Now, this is separate than the slogan, as Papa John's did make assertions in an ad that its pizza dough was made with, quote, clear filtered water, while its competitors like Pizza Hut use, quote, whatever comes out of the tap.
Hey, where'd you get this cheese from? The faucet?
The trial court held these particular claims could mislead consumers and therefore tainted Papa John's slogan. However, Papa John's appealed the decision and argued in court that, of course, the slogan wasn't true and shouldn't be believed. They argued its slogan, better ingredients, better pizza, constituted non-actionable puffery. And guess what? The Fifth Circuit agreed, concluding that, quote, the slogan by itself was not a claim customers could justifiably rely on because it concerned individual taste, not subject to scientific verification. The court also found that the slogan epitomizes the exaggerated advertising, blustering, and boasting by a manufacturer upon which no consumer could reasonably rely. So they got to keep their slogan. Now, the court still upheld the jury's finding that the slogan was misleading if considered in conjunction with Papa John's entire marketing campaign. Quote, the court stated that when viewed in combination with Papa John's dough and sauce ads, such as the filtered water claim, the slogan changed from non-actionable puffery into a quantifiable statement of fact regarding the relative quality of its ingredients. So that's a great example of puffery and how puffery could actually turn into a false statement depending on the context. And the antitrust article is full of other great examples that bore out in court. Now, interestingly, on the weekend, I came across the following ad for dog food in the February issue of Good Housekeeping magazine, and I thought it fit here perfectly. You guys will know why when I read it to you. The copy reads, not all dog food is created equal. Some brands like Purina Dog Chow Complete Adult contain ingredients like corn and animal fat. It goes on to list the ingredients in dog chow versus blue with the copy. Compare and see why 9 out of 10 people who feed dog chow prefer the ingredients in blue. Then in very small print at the bottom of the ad, it reads, quote, Blue Life Protection Formula and Purina Dog Chow Complete Adult both provide complete and balanced nutrition. So obviously these guys were pretty aware that, you know, they couldn't use puffery in this ad. Yeah. And basically what they asked was, you know, their clients or consumers to compare the top 5 ingredients, and they said 9 out of 10 of them preferred the ingredients in there. So it's so subjective.
Yeah.
Bottom line, puffery is a powerful marketing tool that helps build a brand's image. It's a way to grab consumers' attention by using bold advertising claims that don't require substantiation. Put simply, puffery is a way to lie about your products and get away with it. But as the lawyers in the antitrust article caution, quote, as recent case law has emphasized, the more the claim resembles a measurable fact or comparative advertisement, the more likely the claim will require substantiation, and if not supported, the advertiser will be held strictly liable. And in case you didn't realize it yet, checkers, this was definitely the best segment you have ever heard on the Reality Check.
Number one segment. The whole time you were talking, Cristina, I thought about that wonderful episode of Seinfeld where he buys his father a shirt that says "Number One Dad," and the other father takes offense to it. You think you're better than me? You think you were better than me, Seinfeld? From puffery to bombast, Bohemian Rhapsody and Brian May. Pat, what should we know?
Okay, so I wanted to tell a story about Brian May. When I mentioned this to the TRC crew, Adam and Darren clearly had no idea who I was talking about.
No, I thought it was maybe the infomercial guy with the really dark beard.
Brian May is the guitar player for Queen. Cristina and I went and saw the biopic Bohemian Rhapsody. I assume, Adam and Darren, you've not seen it?
No, but I would like to eventually. No spoilers.
I haven't seen it, and I don't expect I will, so you can spoil.
So before I tell my Brian May story, I thought I'd also take the opportunity to do a little fact-checking on that movie. First off, I'll say that I really enjoyed it, and that some of the timelines or facts of the Queen and Freddie Mercury story were changed or embellished is mostly fine. It probably makes sense for a more compelling movie, but bend some of the facts they did. So needless to say, there'll be a couple of spoilers here.
Oh.
I'm pulling from articles from Rolling Stone and another site that is new to me. It's called historyversushollywood.com, and it's kind of a fun site that fact-checks movies. So, in the movie, Freddie Mercury stumbles into a 1970 gig by a band called Smile. Brian May and Roger Taylor, who will later be part of Queen, are in that band, and Mercury meets up with them just moments after their singer and bass player quits, and he wows them with an a cappella version of one of their songs. In reality, Mercury was a longtime friend of the singer of Smile, and he had been pestering the band for a while about becoming a member. In the movie, Mike Myers portrays a record executive named Ray Foster, who fights with Queen because he hates the song Bohemian Rhapsody, refusing to release it as a single, and tells the band that they need to make more commercial music. The band walks out because they believe in their artistic vision. As they do, they throw a rock through Foster's window. In reality, Foster's character is very, very, very loosely based on Roy Featherstone from EMI, who thought Bohemian Rhapsody was a little too long to be a single, but he was actually a huge fan. Everything else about that character is made up, and it seems to me to be written around Mike Myers delivering this one line. In the movie, Foster says, quote, "Teenagers are not going to be headbanging in the car to Bohemian Rhapsody."
Yeah, it was fun.
So the first time I heard the song Bohemian Rhapsody was when I went to the theater and I watched the movie Wayne's World, where they sing along to Bohemian Rhapsody and headbang in the car. So that's
And Mike Myers had to fight to get that song in the movie, too.
Oh, awesome.
Absolutely, this is a cheeky reference to Wayne's World, the 1992 movie starring Myers and Dana Carvey, in which the characters famously headbang to Bohemian Rhapsody.
Awesome.
In the movie, Freddie reveals that he's signed a $4 million deal, a solo deal, and he's done it behind the rest of the band's back. Everyone else is livid, and they all go their separate ways, splitting up the group. The movie makes it seem like the band hasn't spoken in a couple of years, leading up to their triumphant 1985 performance at Live Aid. In reality, the whole band agreed to take a break in early 1983 after years of solid touring. They began recording the album The Works months later in August 1983 and were never broken up. The movie portrays 1985's Live Aid concert as a reunion of the band who weren't even on speaking terms when they get an offer to play the show. They make their peace, and they struggle to get back into playing shape. During rehearsals, Mercury reveals that he is HIV positive, but he wants to keep the news private and focus on the music. The band then goes on to have an amazing performance. The reality is that the band released The Works in early 1984 and toured that album all over the world. The last show of that tour was just weeks before the Live Aid show. They were an extremely well-rehearsed band when they played Live Aid, and yes, their performance was amazing.
In the business, we call that tour legs.
Right.
When you got your tour legs.
Lastly, it's hard to know exactly when Mercury learned that he was HIV positive, but most sources who knew him pin it as occurring sometime between 1986 and 1987. He almost certainly had no clue before the Live Aid show, and probably not until at least a year later. All right, so that's some fact-checking on Bohemian Rhapsody. Let me move on to story time. This is about Brian May. Regular TRC listeners will know that I played guitar in a band that put out some albums and did some touring. When I was learning to play the guitar picks were hard to come by. I'm not sure why that is, but I never seemed to have any. So I started playing with pennies, which I guess is what I could find. Sometime after that, I got a guitar teacher and a mentor. Shout out to Rob. If you're listening, I'd love to hear from you. Rob was a coworker of my stepfather's who lived a few houses down. I guess at some point he suggested that I come over with my guitar and see if he could teach me a few things. In the year or so that followed, he taught me a lot. He was a good guitar player and an even better teacher. But on that first meeting, he noticed me starting to play with a penny, and he gave me a handful of picks, pointing out that I was going to break a lot of strings playing with a coin. And then he said, "You must be a big Brian May fan." I didn't understand, so I nodded and I said, "Yeah, I am." Years later, I became a better guitar player and a pretty big Brian May fan. I came to learn that there was a legend surrounding May, that his sound was due not only to his signature guitar known as the Red Special, which he designed and built, but also that he played with a British sixpence coin instead of a pick. I've always wondered if that was true, if maybe he played with one a few times and it became a story about him, wouldn't he always be breaking strings, etc.? It's not really the sort of thing that people would doubt or that I would dig in to cover on the show, except for something kind of cool happened earlier this month. I'm sure many listeners are aware that on New Year's Day, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft did a flyby of Kuiper Belt object Ultima Thule. Brian May is the guitar player for Queen, but he's also an astrophysicist. He's been mentioned as a science team collaborator with regards to the New Horizons mission, and on New Year's Eve, he released a song called New Horizons.
Wow.
The intent was to bring attention to the mission. Now, I've linked to a Scientific American blog post called The Moment We First Saw Ultima Thule Up Close. I recommend reading it, but the key point for this story is that the first person to see the first high-resolution images was our friend and frequent TRC contributor, Dr. Stuart Robbins. So here's what Stuart wrote on Facebook. The first to lay eyes on the high-res images of MU-69 Ultima Thule was me, because I hit refresh slightly before others did. Brian May took his picture with me and my computer screen. Photos tomorrow after the image is released. Awesome. Now, first off, that is just really cool.
Yeah.
And that's probably what I should have said, but instead I said, quote, ask him if the sixpence thing is true.
Perfect.
To which Stuart replies, he says, quote, yeah, it's true. It's a little old sixpence. Always.
Wow.
So there you have it. From Brian May's lips to your ears via Stuart Robbins and the New Horizons flyby of the farthest object in the solar system to ever be visited by a spacecraft. Brian May does always play guitar with a sixpence.
So from a technical point of view, is his custom guitar perhaps made with some tougher strings? Or does he's a rock star, so he busts strings and he puts new ones in and who cares? It's his rock star life.
He's got a guitar tech who changes his strings probably every single show.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And he's probably got a line of 30 guitars that he can play at any given time. But that said, busting a string in the middle of a song sucks. So he must have a light touch for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pat. And thanks for listening, everyone. I did some coverage of the Lincoln Memorial, now soon to be known as controversy, and just called for people to be a bit more patient, a bit more thoughtful, and think more about the information that they have and whether it's complete. Cristina explored Puffery and showed us that as long as a company is making an outrageous claim that people probably won't literally take to be true, they're allowed to say it. And Pat explored Bohemian Rhapsody and Brian May, and it turns out he did use that sixpence.
Awesome.
Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, Cuboids.
Stay classy, not smart-assy.
We'll talk to you next week, everyone.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
Now, Cristina, to talk to us about Puffery.
Oh, you know me. Basketball and guitars.
You didn't see, he had to pause a moment to think of something musically related.
Guitars.
That's what we were talking about.
And
Guitars.
trombones.
Let me just summarize the totality of Toronto. You got some basketballs, a guy named Rake, and music.